Thank you for taking the time. And first of all, how are you, and how's the situation on your end?
Oh, no, thank you for inviting me. We're doing fine here in Memphis. We're struggling uh, with the COVID pandemic, just like everybody else in the United States is, and hopefully we're going to come to an end in the next month or so. And I know it's affected all industries, including medicine. But thank you for asking.
So my big question for you is, you pulled a surprise on the whole industry by doing a deal at a time where no one thinks it's possible to do a deal. So I'm curious to learn what the process was on your end. How did it come about? And more importantly, how did you decide? I'm sure you weighed pros and cons of doing it at this time. I'm just interested in learning about the whole process right from the beginning.
Okay. Well, we'll take it back several years. Historically, Gastro One has been a group that has believed in consolidation. In 2014, there was the merger of the two larger groups in Memphis to form the largest group now in the Mid-South. And we've seen the benefits of consolidation on a local level. And we're in the camp that I think a lot of our colleagues are, that consolidation is necessary to have the clout and have a seat at the table as medicine changes from a fee-for-service platform to whatever it becomes, whether value-based medicine, population health, Medicare for all, or whatever. It is important to have a large group. So we've never had to be convinced that consolidation was necessary. We think that just like in any business in the United States outside of medicine, which is showing consolidation, that it is mandatory for medical practices, especially independent medical practices, to band together to be able to not only survive but thrive in the upcoming healthcare landscape. And we need these numbers to have clout. So again, it was never an issue for us to decide whether we should consolidate or not. We saw what we were doing in Memphis, and we're thinking not just this year, but 5, 10 years in the future, that it's important to have a larger group in a defined geographical area to, again, have influence and clout with payers and healthcare systems. So once we decided to do this, I was fortunate to actually meet Bill Lautman, who's the principal of Nexus Health Capital, I think at one of the GI roundtable conferences. And we hired them as our independent banking advisor. Bill at Nexus Health Capital has probably done more deals, transactions in the GI space and in healthcare than most other banking advisors. So we shared our philosophies together, and then we put out our confidential informational memorandum, which is sort of like a prospectus. We got a significant amount of replies with tentative LOIs, about 50. And we basically interviewed a dozen of those and pared it down and made a decision as to our private equity partner. We had really great candidates. We looked at current consolidators and new consolidators, and then chose Webster Equity Partners as a partner in healthcare with Gastro One, and formed our MSO called One GI.
Uh-huh. Yeah, thank you. And now how long did the process take?
Oh, this process probably took about 9 months from start to finish. A long process, but a very interesting process. It was a little harder for us to go through the process because we wanted to basically start from scratch ourselves. And it was also very important for us to lay the fundamentals of this platform. We have several groups in this area that will be joining us and are interested in joining One GI. So, as you know, when we develop what they call the life after the deal terms with private equity, those are sort of set for the future. So we didn't do it just with Gastro One. We sought the opinion and advice of several GI groups in a 4-state area on what their thoughts are with life after the deal, and then codify them in our transaction with Webster Equity Partners. So for future consolidation and partnerships, it'll be a much easier process.
Okay. Now, but this whole life after the deal, has that not changed now? Did you think about it? I'm sure the final conversations were happening once the crisis started. And did that have any bearing on physician productivity estimates that Webster might have used in coming up with a valuation, or any of those things?
Uh, well, Webster. First of all, I think they're looking at the long-term vision, and they know what's happening with COVID, but that didn't deter them proceeding with the deal as laid out in their original letter of intent. We did not vary from that at all. Webster has an intimate knowledge of the GI space, and they're very physician-centric. So their motto is that they want to provide the business acumen and the financial backbone to enable growth, and they do not want to interfere or affect the clinical practice of medicine. They see that Gastro One is doing an excellent job with taking care of patients. So basically, they want us to continue to provide excellent patient care, and that's really their mantra. So nothing really changed in the deal as far as any of the specifics in the original pre-COVID letter of intent.
Okay, that's great to know. Now, I wanted to ask you on what is likely to happen post-COVID, right? Like, after the crisis settles down and this long flattening of the curve happens. How is that going to affect private equity-led deals?
During the crisis, as you know, there's been basically a halt in private equity transactions. Deals have been either put on hold or off completely. So, as you said, we're probably the only PE deal in the medical realm that I know of that really concluded during this crisis. And actually, for our standpoint, we are accelerating as Webster has really allocated considerable resources to One GI. Again, they see a long-term strategy, and they feel they're very bullish on healthcare down the road, and feel that the COVID is, of course, a setback, but just a blip in the road, which actually may accelerate private equity afterwards. Many independent practices have had trouble navigating through the business side of medicine with all the changes that are happening, even in the good times before COVID, and let alone through this pandemic. And I think the added safety in numbers is really true. I think a lot of physicians see the benefits of banding together and being able to withstand another pandemic or withstand external pressures from the healthcare industry that are affecting independent physicians. So we really feel that consolidation will continue, maybe put on a little hiatus, because a lot of the other private equity companies have been over leveraged and have to put their resources into stability during this crisis. And we're fortunate that we have a private equity fund that has the resources to continue during this crisis. But I think when the crisis hopefully comes to an end in the near future, that private equity transactions will pick up.
Now, this whole second bite of the apple, the initial deals that were done in GI were back in 2016. And typical private equity plays are between 3 to 7 years, an average of 5. Do you see that the current crisis would delay these exits from happening? What are your views, and what have you been hearing from the private equity world?
I haven't heard anything specific. At Audax, the private equity behind Gastro Health was established first, and I understand that their plans were in the near future to entertain a transaction. I would imagine that right now that's on hold, as many of the potential buyers and secondary lenders and co-lenders in a transaction right now are just sort of watching to see what's happening as the economy improves and how long it takes to get out of the COVID crisis. You had asked about the pros and cons of the deal, and and basically, I think starting with the cons, the biggest con of any private equity transaction is really change. Change takes people out of their comfort zone, and it makes physicians nervous when they believe they will lose, control of a business that they've been the sole owners of up until now. And I think that's why it's important to really pick the right private equity partner. As I said, Webster is very physician-centric, and they are leaving all the control of the clinical aspect in physician control. So, that was very important to us. My advice to somebody seeking out a private equity transaction is that your partner is like a marriage. You're going to be with them, as you said, from 3 to 7 years, and you really want to get a company or partnership that, again, will let physicians practice medicine like they know how to practice, and really just bring the stability and the business sense to enable, growth and consolidation.
How are valuations going to change post-COVID? Is that going to change because the number of procedures may be reduced, or is all this going to have an effect on how practices might be valued by private equity?
That's a great question. I think that eventually we're going to catch up on our procedures. A lot of our procedures were deferred but not canceled, especially since we postponed elective colonoscopies, which people realize they need and will have done after the crisis is over. But it may affect valuation somewhat, because the financial institutions will look at earnings over a certain period of time when they make their valuations and compute their EBITDA. But I've impressed with my group that the reason that we entered into a private equity deal was not to take money off the table. This was never an issue that we're going to take so much money and put it in pockets and that's it. The money was always, or the financial aspect was always secondary. The reason for this is down the road to be necessary to compete in the healthcare environment. And we feel that consolidation is important for us to maintain our practice, both the way we practice medicine, but also maintain the financial upsides of independent practice. And that's our long-term goal. So even if the valuation may change somewhat in the near term with private equity transactions, that's not, to me, the important thing. The important aspect of this whole reason to consolidate is looking 5-10 years in the future, that consolidation is necessary. So to some, the valuations may change, but that's never been in the forefront of our minds. It's the end goal that is the important thing. And I think that overall, looking into the future, the upsides financially and to maintain independent practices way outweigh any changes in valuation that may happen in the near term.
Okay. And while on the topic of valuation, I had a follow-up question. Clearly, gastroenterology is going the digital way, right? Like
Yes.
if anything, and I'm not just talking about telemedicine, but I do think post-COVID, the digital direction for GI is going to accelerate. Now, a lot of these valuations are based on an old world that might not exist in the future, right? Like so previously, like so it's certain procedures we've done it in a certain way, but then post COVID, it might look differently. We might do the same procedures differently. There's a whole digital aspect to it. Just your reflection on how that might connect to valuations.
You are the guru of prognosticating the digital future of GI, and I know you have a book coming out, Scope Forward, that details this. So we're all looking forward to that. But I agree with you that we are changing, not just with telehealth, but we're going to digital world. And I'm not sure it affects the valuation per se, but one of the attractions of gastroenterology from private equity is that we have a full set of ancillaries, and ancillaries have been flexible and changing throughout time. We've been able to add ancillaries like infusion and pharmacy and research, and we're very diversified as the specialty goes, which is an attraction in the financial world. And I think that things will always change. And as we go into digital world, that will be another ancillary that will come into play. And it just exemplifies the place that gastroenterology has with this diversification. And that will continue no matter, continue through all the technological advances that are happening in medicine.
Thank you. And I wish you the very best in going forward, and do stay safe, you and your team. I will talk to you soon. Thank you.
Okay, thank you so much. Stay safe and sound.